Hello, folks. Today's message is to do with what's going on in the in recent events, namely in the Far East. And I would like to talk about, as always, typing the spiritual and the natural, and what's going on in our spiritual post-Branhamic world, which types directly to what's going on in the natural political world. And there have been some major events as of recently on the news, and they pertain mostly to the island of Taiwan and China, and namely the Speaker of the House of the U.S. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who went to Taiwan, which the Chinese Communist Party was not too happy with. So anyway, those are the current events, and this all goes back to the other day I had preached a sermon on the war in the East, essentially. Now the problems in the West, I should say, with Ukraine and Russia and all that going on, and it's called the Don. It's about the Don River and how that related to what was going on in the spiritual. And I said in that one, and if you see this one, you like this, and you might want to watch that one. But I had said that it's funny that all the things that we're going through still right now to this day in 2022 is all basically leftovers of what was going on in the days of the Second World War. And I went back and showed how that all that, everything that's going on right now in Ukraine was leftover stuff, leftover loose ends from World War II, and it's just still going on. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about here, but I want to talk about it in the East. And what we have here with the Taiwan situation, the Taiwan and China situation, is none other than stuff that was left over from the days of the 20s and 30s and 40s of the Second World War and that era. And that's what's still being, that's what's still the issue, believe it or not, is that leftover stuff from so long ago. People might think that was another day, but and it was, but that's where all this stuff stems from. So, and years ago, I had some sermons on whenever I was, whenever the Third Coming group was all together. I had some sermons on connecting the political history basically with what was going on then at the time in the spiritual, and talking about how that World War II related to that. So now we've moved on some years since then, and we're more into a modern setting. But some of those things will kind of come into play here to explain the situation and the players. And I'd like to tell what's going on with the. This is all going to pertain to things like the message people, the Branham message people, the Love Divine people, pretty much those sorts of things. And so anyway, and their ideologies and how that they compare to the ideologies of the Asian theater right now, politically and naturally. So anyhow, without further ado, I will try my best to get into it, and I will try my best to make it as professional as possible. Try not to hold you all up too long. Okay, the first thing I need to do is I need to make set the stage so that I can say what I want to say. So I can tell you what's going on, but I have to go into history to do that, to explain it, so that everybody will be up to speed. And I know a lot of you know history, maybe even better than me. So if, but anyway, I have to do that to get it to where I can tell you what's going on now. So anyway, what is going on now is that the major news event of the past couple days has been, as I said, that Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, went to Taiwan and visited the Taiwanese, the president of Taiwan, etc., etc. And China had warned, let's say, whenever I say China, let's say, well, we need to redefine that. Well, we don't need to redefine it. We need to define it as it really is. The CCP, China, that controls the mainland of China, the People's Republic of China, let's say. They had warned against Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan and visiting Taiwan. Now, why is that? Why is China? Why is the communist regime in mainland China? Why are they so concerned about Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan? That's a good question for people who don't pay much attention to it. That's a good question. Why? Why is all this going on? Why is there such an uproar over this? Why is it such a big deal that a U.S. state representative, a U.S. representative, would cause so much concern just to go in to visit a country? Okay, that's a good question. Why? And I'm going to answer that question as to the best I can. So anyway, they had warned about her going, but Nancy Pelosi went anyway. Okay, it was a courageous act. You can say, for those of you who might see this that are Americans, maybe you have vastly different opinions on political opinions than Nancy Pelosi, because she's been known to be, pretty much to one side on things, and of course a lot of people would have differences of opinion with her. But nonetheless, I think everybody, pretty much from one side of the spectrum to the other, would agree that it was a courageous act what she did, and it made a major statement. And of course, you got people would say, well, she went for this or that reason or whatever. Well, I'm not saying she didn't. I'm not saying she didn't go and she didn't have ulterior motives or whatever, ulterior things that she wanted to accomplish. I mean, they're politicians. What do you expect? That's how it works. Okay, but nonetheless, no matter what her intent or their intent may have been in doing that, it was nonetheless, in my opinion, a courageous act for her or a representative to have went to Taiwan, because the communists had warned her not to go. Okay, it was a courageous act. All right, I'll tell you something else too. Nancy Pelosi was born, I believe it was March 26th, and that makes her an Aries. And Aries people are known for being courageous. They are known for not being people that would back down from a fight. In fact, probably there are people that if you dare to challenge them, that would just make them want to do it even more. And I think that was probably how Nancy Pelosi felt, just guessing. So anyway, moving on, I'm going to do my best to start from the beginning here and then build it up to why her state visit to Taiwan was such a problem in the first place. Okay, so let us begin our story. let us begin our story in history to explain this, to build it up to where we're at. All right, the three players that there are three players at. Well, first let me say this. I have titled this "The Spiritual Republic of China," and I will explain that title as we go forward. Okay, I would say this. The title of this is not the Spiritual People's Republic of China. The title to this is the Spiritual Republic of China. Okay, so I'll explain that in a minute. But there are three main players that you need to know to understand what I'm getting ready to tell you. The three main players, essentially, historically, were really only two. It's down to two now, but I've got to say three to kind of, historically there was three, but it's really down to just two now. Okay, because well, sort of. Anyway, if you go back to the days of the 20s and 30s when all this got started, that builds up to what we have now, the issue that we have now with Taiwan and the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, where it all started was there was a civil war in China. Okay, we're just talking about the Chinese here. There's a civil war in China. And what it was comprised of was two factions, two sides. One was the nationalist Chinese, which would have been the more monarchical, I suppose, Chinese. They were, that was one side of it. So you got the nationalist Chinese. And then on the other side, you had the communist Chinese. And they were in a civil war. Okay, the nationalist Chinese were led by a guy named Chiang Kai-shek. Okay, the communist Chinese were led by a guy named Chairman, well, it wasn't, he might not have been chairman officially at the time, but was led by a guy named, the communists were led by a guy named Mao Zedong. Okay, these are very famous names in history now. So, anyway, what happened was China was in a state of civil war between the communists and the nationalists. The nationalists had ruled China, to my understanding, and probably with a monarchical head to some degree. And I'm not sure, I don't know if Chiang Kai-shek himself was monarchical or not. I don't know. I think maybe. I'm not sure. Somebody who knows history better than me could tell me that. I'd like to know that. But anyway, he may have had some claim to the throne there to some degree, other than just a kind of like a political claim. But anyway, so anyway, you had these two, and they were at civil war back in the days of the 20s and the 30s. Okay, enter the Japanese, the Imperial Japanese. Okay, that is the third part of this. That's the third thing that you really need to know about, and they become less significant later on as the story goes on. So, what happened was that, see, I put this up here, Greater China. Taiwan was always a part of China. This is Taiwan down here. Taiwan is an island off of the mainland of China. This is mainland China and Taiwan, but Taiwan is really China. Okay, it's not really separate. It's just, it's like, to compare it, it's like the United States and Hawaii. Hawaii is an island off of the United States, but it's part of the United States. It's part of the greater United States, but it's called Hawaii. Okay, but it's still part of the greater United States. That's about the way Taiwan is. Okay, so anyway, what was going on was, so this is all Greater China, including Taiwan. Okay, this is what was at stake here in the Civil War, the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese represent the post, I would say, third coming age is what it represents. It represents all the spiritual post third coming people out here right now, like your love divine people and whoever else that's basically post kind of third coming age. Anybody who thinks kind of beyond that is represented by China in this. Okay, historically and spiritually historically. Okay, so that's to set the stage so you'll understand what's going on here. Okay, so what happened was like I said, in the 20s and 30s, they were at civil war. China was at civil war. Communist on one side, nationalist Chinese, communist Chinese on one side, nationalist Chinese on the other. Then Japan, which was at the time Imperial Japan, started invading everything in Southeast Asia. They invaded, or in the Far East, they invaded into Manchuria, which was, I believe, a part of China originally. They took over Manchuria, and they took over several areas along the coast of China. They, like some cities, I don't know, maybe Shanghai, I don't remember exactly which cities they took over, but they took over several cities along the coast. So let's just say that the rising sun of Japan had taken over kind of here and here, and here, and here, etc., etc. Okay. And so anyway, what happened was when the Chinese, when they were attacked by Japan, the Chiang Kai-shek still thought that the communists were a bigger problem, a bigger threat to his rule over China than even the outside threat from the Japanese. Okay, and let me explain to you who the Japanese are. I'll start with them. The Japanese, as I said many years ago, I'd done a sermon and I talked about how that the Philippines, how that in World War II, and this all relates to that. It's the same scenario here. That when the Philippines was invaded by Japan in World War II, and Douglas MacArthur had to leave. Douglas MacArthur was the head American head person in the Philippines. He had to leave when Japan invaded, but he famously said, "I shall return." Okay, everybody knows "I shall return." You know, it's famous in America, it's famous in the Philippines. Everybody knows the statement, "I shall return." Okay, so anyway, I said, and what Douglas MacArthur was, I said, was because, see, the Philippines represents the people with the spiritual understanding of the Branhamic age, post Branhamic age understanding. The spiritual, they're these people. Okay, they're the people that know, that understand that grew up in that, etc. Okay, so what it represented was, that was a different sermon. That's not what I'm talking about today exactly, but just so you get it, because I'm talking about China today, I'm not talking about the Philippines exactly, but I've got to make this case so you'll understand who the Japanese are. So Douglas MacArthur left. The Japanese came in, invaded the Philippines, and then Douglas MacArthur eventually makes it back to the Philippines, lands back on the Philippines, and says, "I have returned." Okay, what that represented was Douglas MacArthur represented William Branham, because it was William Branham's first ride and William Branham's second ride, because William Branham, whenever he left the scene in the 60s, he so famously said, "We will ride this trail again." Well, that was the same thing as Douglas MacArthur saying, "I shall return." Okay, then what happened was, for that era, that 4 or 5 years of Philippine history and that 40 years of Branhamic history, what happened was these message pastors came and ruled from the outside. Essentially, they were an outside threat. Okay, they come in and ruled over the people. They were, they were imperialist in nature, and they just wanted to rule the people, to rule the Branhamic world. Okay, and so anyway, what happened was they did so just like the Japanese did in the Philippines. The message people ruled over the spiritual people the same way. Okay, so and then what happened was eventually Douglas MacArthur returns to the Philippines and pushes the Japanese out. Okay, so what happened was when the Third Coming came along, Douglas MacArthur came back. The second ride of William Branham came back and pushed out all of the rule of these message imperialist pastors over the spiritual people. That's what happened with the Third Coming. That's what the Third Coming did. Okay, so I said all that to explain to you this. Remember, I said there are three people you need to understand here: Japan and Chinese communists, Chinese nationalists, or Imperial Japan, Chinese communists, Chinese nationalists. That's the three peoples you need to understand here to get this. Okay, and I just told you the story about the Philippines and how all that worked, just so you'll understand who that the Japanese are. The Japanese, the Imperial Japanese of the time of the 1940s, represented the message people by today's spiritual standards, or by recent history, as recent spiritual history. Okay, so So what was going on was the message people had, like in the Philippines, was taking over parts of China, or parts of the spiritual I'm going to speak about here. Parts of the Japanese imperialists were taking over parts of China, I should say, not the message, but sorry. Anyway, so what they represented, though, they represented essentially an outside threat. What these message pastors was an outside imperialist threat to the spiritual people. Okay, all right. So now China. Now moving on. China represents here the spiritual people. Okay, this was an outside threat that took control of the spiritual people, even in China. Okay. So, like I said, these are the message people. Okay. Then what happened was the World War II eventually ended. And so what happened was the Chinese, after World War II ended, the Japanese imperial threat was over. Okay. What happened to us was that eventually the days of the third coming come to an end. And what happened was the threat of outside invasion, outside control of the imperialist Japanese ended. Okay, because they had been defeated. They were defeated by the third coming, essentially, and that was kind of the Second World War of the spiritual post-Branhamic type of history. Okay, so then what happened? Once they were defeated, then the Chinese went right back to civil war. The Chinese, the communists and the nationalists, joined forces while the war was going on, while World War II was going on. See, they had been fighting each other before the Japanese invaded and the war happened, and then the communists and the nationalist Chinese joined forces together to fight the Japanese. Okay. It was essentially how it happened. It's kind of loosely so, but anyway, that's essentially what happened. So they were all against the Japanese, but they were totally different. They had been fighting a civil war with each other before the Japanese came. Then what happened was once World War II was over and the Japanese were defeated, then the Chinese communists and the Chinese nationalists went immediately back to fighting a civil war amongst themselves. Okay. So, to which Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of nationalist China, made a now very famous statement. He said, and this is during World War II, before they went back to civil war in China, he said that the outside threats, I can't quote it exactly, but he said, Chiang Kai-shek, leader of nationalist China, said that the outside threats to China, like Imperial Japan, was a disease of the skin, and that communism, that the communist threat to China, the Chinese communists, was a disease of the heart. That's a very famous statement in history. So what he meant by that was that, see, Chiang Kai-shek always believed that China was more, or that the communists were more of a problem than the Imperial Japanese were, who was taking them over, around the coast and whatnot. So what he believed was that Japan it was easier to deal with Japan than it was to deal with the communists, because it's easier to deal with a skin disease than it is to deal with a heart disease. If you have a skin disease, you can deal with that. You might be able to get some cream or something to put on it and fight it. Okay? And that was the way he felt about the Japanese. You could deal with them. You could put some cream on that and fight it. But when it come to communism, that was a disease of the heart. That was very difficult to deal with because that was internal. That was not an external threat. That was an internal threat. Okay, so that's the Japanese were essentially an external threat, and then they were defeated. But communism was an internal threat that threatened to, kill the whole thing essentially, a heart disease. Okay, so let me tell you who those people are. Let me tell you who the communists and who the nationalists are. After, like I said, World War II was essentially the days of the Third Coming. Okay. After World War II was over, then you had the post Third Coming thought processes. Okay, and those include basically, in my opinion, two, which was what you had all along. Okay, Japan is done. World War II is over. Okay, the message people have been defeated. What you had at that point was you had two essentially ideas. And one idea took over the mainland of China. The other idea, see, what happened here historically was that, let me tell some history before I tell the spiritual. After World War II and the Civil War in China resumed, what happened was that the communists, the communist Chinese took over the whole mainland of China, all here. They took over all here, okay, and the nationalists fled to the island of Taiwan, okay. Taiwan, of course, was part of Greater China, you know. So, but anyway, what happened was that the nationalists fled to Taiwan, the island off of China, and the communists took over the whole mainland of China. Okay, and that's the way that's the way it's basically been until today. So, that is why, to bring it up to today, that's to bring it up to current events, that is why that Nancy Pelosi caused such a stink when she went to Taiwan. Because what it is that Taiwan still basically, the nationalists in Taiwan, the now democratic, essentially, of Taiwan, have claim to the rulership of Greater China. Okay. Now the communists, of course, believe that they rule everything. They believe that they rule Greater China, and they also believe that they rule Taiwan too. They have what is called the One China policy. So they believe in rule, that they rule everything. But Taiwan has not been, let's say, conquered, I guess you might say. So what you have here is you have still to this day, the Civil War really never ended, because the communists took over on the mainland, and they believe that they rule all of China, Greater China, which includes Taiwan. And then the nationalists, the democratic nationalists essentially now, believe that they are the rightful leaders of all of China, believe it or not. They don't look at themselves as just Taiwan. They look at themselves as rulers of all of China, okay? Taiwan is not called, Taiwan is officially called, we call it Taiwan, but Taiwan is officially called the Republic of China. The communist CCP that rules mainland China is known as the People's Republic of China, okay? So what is going on here is Taiwan, they consider themselves to be the Republic of China, the whole thing, okay? So whenever Nancy Pelosi goes to, and that's an issue certainly for the communist Chinese, because these are people out here that claim that they have the right to the legitimate rule of all of China and not them. That's why that the communists they start to shake a little bit whenever a state dignitary from another country goes and visits Taiwan, because that lends legitimacy. Anytime that somebody would dare to do that to them, that lends legitimacy to the Taiwanese claim to rule over China, okay? Because essentially the Civil War never ended, okay? So I said all that to say this. What's going on in the spiritual? Let me tell you who these two are. Let me tell you who these two mentalities represent of Taiwan and mainland China, of the nationalist democratic Taiwan and mainland communist ruled CCP, Chinese Communist Party, mainland China. Who those people are and who those mentalities are this. The love divine people in the spiritual. The love divine people, because they're all Chinese. Taiwan was Chinese. They have to be a people out here who bear a common ancestry. And the common ancestry was that they were all spiritual and fought against the Japanese and the message in World War II. So all these people that I'm getting ready to talk about are by naturally they're all Chinese. They're all related. They're all one group of people essentially. In terms of that, but so the love divine people are your communists. Okay. They represent every idea of the communist mainland China. Okay, and I'm going to tell you who Taiwan is and what that ideology is. It's really about ideology. It's about, let's just say, the love divine ideology is mainland China, and let's make it a little less personal. Let's say that and that would explain it better, I think. The love divine ideology is mainland China, which is communism, which is equal thought process for everybody. Okay, it's or equal, everybody's equal, etc., etc. Okay, and then Taiwan is this island. It's an idea that is essentially an island off of that idea that rules the mainland. Let's say. Because the love divine, since the days of the third coming were over, the love divine rules basically everything. That ideology rules basically everything that's post third coming. Okay. Except for one. What the love divine ideology represents is that the Chinese communism, what the ideology is that communism, which is equal, egalitarianism, everything's equal, okay? And that basically, I put it this way, there are two big ideas that the love divine have. One is that everybody's equal, essentially, and spiritually equal, let's say. And then the other idea is that there are no more prophets, okay? What does a prophet represent? A prophet represents a divine inspiration to be leader of the spiritual world. Okay, so what that is, see, the love divine do not believe in any more prophets because it's against their mentality of things. It's against their the love divine ideology of equalism. Everything's equal. Well, that is like in total. That's just opposed to the idea that you would have a prophet. You know, their idea is that this age is so modern that there are no more prophets anymore. Everything's just equal, and that's how it works. That's the idea. Okay. So anyway, and then the other idea, that's essentially communism. You know, that's how it works. Okay, spiritual or natural. Okay, and then a prophet. The idea that you could have a prophet is it's a divinely inspired leadership. Okay, they don't believe in a divine rule like of leadership. They don't believe. They believe in the rule of the people. Just like that's why it's called the People's Republic. Okay, that's why the love divine believe in rule of the people. Like for example, if you go back to ancient Israel, a little side note here. If you go back to ancient Israel, then you find that what happened was after the kingdoms of Judah and Israel split, then Israel went in, made their own kingdom, and what they did was they made priests of the lowliest of the people, essentially. So the idea was that, see, communism's always been here. This love divine ideas, communism, all this stuff's always been here. Okay, I'll give several examples here in a little bit to explain that. But anyway, what they believed was whenever Israel split, which is the love divine today, if you know the history of it, that they're a type of the love divine. What happened was they made priests of all the people, of anybody who basically, I guess, wanted to be a priest. See, it used to be that the Levites had the divine right to be the priests. Okay. And then when Israel split off, they made it to where anybody could be a priest. So what it was essentially communism, because whereas beforehand it had been delegated to one tribe, then it was, I guess, pretty much anybody could be a priest. Okay, so that's communism. Communism is that everybody's equal. Okay, so what's going on there is that's the same thing that's going on in the love divine. It's everybody can be a priest. That's the idea. Okay, so everybody can be a priest, and there are no prophets. Okay, because see, in ancient Israel, anytime a prophet came along, well, they'd try to kill him. Elijah or somebody, Jezebel tried to kill him. Okay, so what's going on here is the exact same thing today. Taiwan represents, there's an idea out here that you may not have heard of that is Taiwan. Taiwan was the people that claimed rule over all of China themselves, and were the nationalist, more monarchical, kind of like were leadership of China, back during the early days. And they have a claim to the rulership. Okay, what that is that is the idea of a prophet right now. That is the idea of the office of a prophet right now. See, the Love Divine do not believe in the idea of the office of a prophet right now. They don't believe that there could be any prophet that could come along that could be essentially divinely inspired in such a way and could claim leadership of the spiritual world. Okay, to them it's everybody is the leader. It's communism. It's rule of the people. Okay, they don't believe in such a thing as that. So what Taiwan was the what the nationalists and the Taiwanese represent now is that idea. They believe that they believe in the leadership, that they have the legitimate leadership, the divinely essentially inspired leadership of China, the monarchy. Because what is a monarchy? I'm not saying that Taiwan's maybe so monarchical now, because even the concept of a prophet modernizes, but it's kind of the odds of it, the odds of the monarchical idea. And monarchy, by definition, is basically divine rule of a leader. Okay, so the concept of a prophet, of the office of a prophet, is a divinely inspired leadership. Okay, and the Love Divine do not believe in such a thing. The Chinese Communist Party do not believe in such as that, because that would threaten to overthrow their ideologically. They don't believe in it, and it would also threaten to overthrow both of their respective empires or their respective people's republics or whatever. Okay, empires might not be the best word, because they're kind of like, anyway. So what it is that Taiwan, the nationalist Taiwanese, represent that ideology. They represent the idea that there could be a prophet today who has the divine right to rule the spiritual kingdom, the spiritual China, spiritual greater China. Okay, and let me tell you, I have had this belief. I have had that belief for a very long time, that prophets don't go away, that they're always here, and they do have the right to divinely rule the spiritual, greater spiritual land. Okay, the people. Well, essentially the thought, the ideology. Not really to rule the people exactly, but to rule the spiritual ideology, let's say. Like I said, I don't want to make it too personal, because that's not really how I think of it. And the reason I say that is this. I hope I'm not going off too far here, but the reason I say that is this, is that Taiwan, if you were to take Taiwan and say the 30s or 40s, their idea of that thought process would probably have been quite different than it is today, because even that has modernized. Essentially what I'm saying is the idea of a prophet has modernized itself. Okay, I'm saying that there's still an office of a prophet, but it's a modern version of it. It's it would look different than, say, it did 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago. It would look different. And that's essentially what Taiwan is today. Taiwan has a president, an democratically elected president. It's not, it's not, it don't look like it used to. And I'm not saying that I believe in a prophet. I'm not saying that I believe in a concept of a prophet, the office of a prophet in the old terms. I'm saying that I believe in it in modern terms, okay, which is different from old terms. But I believe in it. The Love Divine do not believe in it at all, okay? They don't believe in such a thing at all. I believe in the concept of a prophet, the office of a prophet in modern terms, which is what Taiwan believes in essentially by relative comparison to all this. That is their ideology. It's it's a democratic prophet, let's say. It's a more modern version of a prophet, but they believe in one. They believe in a divine, essentially the modern version of a divinely inspired leadership of the whole Greater China, whereas the communists don't believe in such a thing. Okay, and they believe in total equal rule, as I've said. So that's what you got here in the Love Divine and what I'm saying. Because the Love Divine don't believe in that at all. They don't believe in the office of a prophet now. And I believe in the office of the modern version of the office of a prophet. Okay, that's Taiwan. That's essentially what Taiwan is. And that is essentially a threat to their ideology. That's a threat to the Love Divine ideology. That anybody would make a claim to that, because that means that you're claiming that you potentially have the leadership of the legitimate leadership of the greater spiritual world, in political terms, the greater spiritual, the greater China. That's why Taiwan is essentially such a problem to them, is because Taiwan claims to have the legitimate rule, the legitimate leadership, I should say, not really rule, but leadership of Greater China. Okay, so that's why it's such a problem to them, and that's why that they don't want anybody to lend any legitimacy to that. They don't want any Nancy Pelosi or some dignitary from another country to go to Taiwan, because that lends legitimacy to the claim of the Taiwanese to rule over all of China. Okay, and the reason that I named this the Spiritual Republic of China is because the official name for Taiwan is they don't call it Taiwan, they call it the Republic of China. Okay, the mainland China is called the People's Republic of China, which is ruled by the communists. Taiwan is called the Republic of China. Well, when they say the Republic of China, they mean the whole kit caboodle, the whole thing, even mainland China. People. So anyway, they still claim rule over all of mainland China and Taiwan, which is, obviously they rule over anyway. Okay, so that's why it's such an issue. What I am telling you today, this ideology of the modernized concept of the office of a prophet, which is represented in the political world out here by Taiwan, is like Taiwan is the Republic of China. What I'm telling you is the Spiritual Republic of China, which is Taiwan, which is the spiritual Taiwan. Okay, the democratic. This is the democratic, non-communist ideology. The Love Divine is the communist ideology. What I'm telling you, is the democratic ideology. All this is post-Third Coming. But what I'm saying is the democratic ideology upon the post-Third Coming world. And what the Love Divine is telling you is the communistic ideology upon the post-Third Coming world. Okay, I can't make it any simpler than that. And I'm going to tell you something. For years, I have had these ideas for years. And for years, I have been called by the Love Divine none other than an island. They all say that my idea is an island. Okay, well, where did the nationalists go to whenever they fled from mainland China? To an island called Taiwan. Okay, I am the island. My ideology is, in fact, an island. They were absolutely right. It was literally an island. Okay, they call my ideology an island essentially. I'm a whatever. Okay, so it literally is an island. Okay, so and then if anybody were to go to Taiwan, if any dignitary from any country out here, if any person from a spiritual or whatever, somebody were to come to my ideology, let's say, and hear my ideology and talk about my ideology, then that is a problem, would be a problem for the love divine, because nobody, they don't want anybody lending any legitimacy to this like Nancy Pelosi did in the political. What I'm saying is that I'm saying that my ideology has the ideology that I say, let's say, the ideology that I have, not my ideology of, but the ideology that I am of, the school of thought that I am of, has the legitimate, the democratic, modern prophet ideology, post third coming ideology here, I'm saying that this ideology has the legitimate rule over this whole post third coming world. I'm saying that the love divine communist mentality has essentially usurped the ideological leadership of China. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the ideology of this, what I'm trying to say here, this modernist, modern prophetic, the modern office of a prophet ideology has the legitimate claim and divine right of leadership in the post third coming world, and not the love divine. That's exactly what I'm saying. I will make no apologies about it. Taiwan doesn't make any apologies about what they believe, that their democracy, that their Chinese democracy really has the legitimate right to rule the whole thing. They don't make any apologies about it, and I'm not making any apologies about what I believe either. Okay? So anyway, but I'm on this island out here. Okay, as it stands, I'm on this island, and the majority of these people, the majority of everybody, the majority of the ideology, the people that have the ideology, are on the mainland, which is ruled by the Chinese Communist Party, which is ruled by the spiritual Chinese Communist Party, which is the love divine mentality. Okay, it is right down the line. The love divine mentality is spiritual communism. I've said that several times. Okay, like I said, what do they believe? Everything's equal. That's communism. What do they believe? They believe that there's no prophets. There cannot be like a monarchical, any sort of thing like that, or a divine right to rule. You see what I mean? They don't believe in anything like that. It's communism right down the line. I could go on and on. I could tell you several other things that make it communism right down the line. If you don't believe me, you can go back and listen to some of my other messages. Okay. So anyway, what I'm saying is that Taiwan, I am a representative of the island of Taiwan, of the Democratic Republic of China. I am a representative today of the democratic ideology in the post-third coming world, the post-third coming spiritual world. I am a representative of the democratic viewpoint upon that, and not the communistic viewpoint upon that. Okay, like for example, here's another thing that the Love Divine has done for years. Their ideology on free speech has been not really free speech. See, China, and I'm not saying that the West doesn't have issues with the more Western, pro-Western side doesn't have its own issues with free speech, but China, mainland communist China, their idea on free speech has basically been that you could say anything as long, they have technically free speech, but all you could say is pro-communistic ideology. Okay, you have free speech to say that. Okay, so it's not really free speech, it's just free speech to say that. I watched a documentary years ago, and it said, and they were talking about after I think China had won the communists had won the civil war in China, there was a Western reporter, I believe, that asked Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao Zedong, asked him, "Are you going to have free speech in China?" To which Mao replied, "Yes, just so long as whatever they say is for the people." Okay. Well, naturally in the West that raises some eyebrows because, how exactly do you define for the people? See, what it is they all think that's great because, you can say anything you want, but you can't say anything against our idea of what's good for the people. You see, that's essentially how it works. And that's essentially how it's worked in the Love Divine. You can't say anything over there unless it's pro their ideology of what's good for the people. What's good for their ideology of what's good for the spiritual people, That's how it works. Okay? So that's what you got. It's, like I said, it's right down the line. I could probably go all day telling you all the things that are connected there. Okay? So anyway, because you go to the Love Divine and try to say something that is outside of what they believe, and it will be deleted. Okay, and not only that, they will send you to a re-education camp. Here, I guess I'm going to start telling the comparatives between the two. Okay, so here's what happens: if you go to the Love Divine and you try to tell them something outside of what they believe, even if it's let's just say this: if you try to say something that is post Third Coming outside of what they believe, because what I have had is I have had an idea that was post Third Coming like them, but was not their idea on things. And so whenever I go to say anything amongst the Love Divine, then it would get deleted because you can't say anything in communist China. You can't. They will delete what you said. In spiritual communist China, it's the same way. They're going to delete what you said. They're going to just make it no more. So anyway, and then what they do is, if you're in communist China and you have you're saying stuff against the ideology of communist China, then they send you to, as far as at least here the West tell it, and I assume it's probably true, they send you to a re-education camp. Okay, so what do the Love Divine do? If you have anything to say that's post Third Coming, that is against their ideology, then they delete it first of all, and because you can't say anything like that in their land, in their controlled land, their usurped authority controlled land of the spiritual people, and they send you to a re-education camp. They think that you need re-educated. They think that if you don't believe the way they do, if you don't believe that their ideology is like theirs, if your post Third Coming thought process is not like theirs, then you need to be re-educated. That's what the Love Divine does. They see, well, this didn't agree with, somebody says something, they say, well, here's what they say. They delete it, and then they're like, and then they would reply with, you need to learn better. Okay, you need to move up to the way we think, and you need to learn better. You need to be re-educated to the modern communistic way of doing things, the modern Love Divine way of doing things. You see, that they've got to re-educate you to that. Okay, so you get put in a re-education camp. Okay, you need to learn. Nobody out here, I don't think, really realizes that there's an ideology that is post Third Coming that is not Love Divine. Everybody just seems to think anything that's post Third Coming, it seems to be a misconception, in my opinion, that anybody that seems to think that anything, the Love Divine people seem to think that anything, if it's post Third Coming, it must be what they think. Well, that's not true. There's an ideology, there's a democratic side of it out here, to their communistic side of it, that is post Third Coming. That is not their ideology, but it is, in fact, post Third Coming. There are two post Third Coming ideologies out here. Okay, the communistic ideology on it and the democratic ideology on it. The Love Divine is the communistic ideology. What I'm saying is the democratic ideology that is all, and both of these are post Third Coming. Okay, so, and of course they say, it's a funny thing that they all believe that if you are not saying what they're saying, then you must just need an education. They assume that you need an education, you need to be educated to the ideology of spiritual communism. essentially. You need to be re-educated to the ideology of spiritual equality. Okay, well, I'm going to do some educating here from history on some folks. See, they believe that, they claim that they believe in humanitarianism, but I believe what they've got is a humanitarian disaster, honestly. I think, in fact, it's a humanitarian disaster, okay, of the grandest of scale. Let's do some educating here. Let's do some historical. You know, there's the old saying: those who don't know history are doomed to repeat their mistakes. Well, let's do some educating here. If we're going to do some educating, like I said, historically, Israel done the same thing. They had made priests of the lowliest of the people. They had done the same concept of making everybody equal. That's what they did. Okay, I said it a while back that the love divine was Israel, and that the third coming people were essentially Judah. Now, I don't know if that would hold up to today, but they pretty much agreed with me at the time. At least, nonetheless, let's just say this. I ain't saying I got it all figured out yet, but nonetheless, we're all pretty much in agreement, even me and the love divine people, that Israel did represent the love divine ideology, because it was what broke away. Okay, so, and all the things that went along with Israel have went along with the love divine, because, like I said, that's what they did. They made the priests, the lowliest of the people, to be priests. That's what the love divine does. They make, essentially, everybody can be a priest. Okay, that's what it is. It's not. There's no. It's not a different system. I don't want to say an old system, because I'm not saying an old system here. I'm saying democracy. This is not old versus new. This is new versus new, essentially. This is that this is a new democracy side of argument versus a new communism side of argument. And really, none of this is new, because all this has been going on for forever. So what was it? What happened in ancient Israel was that they were essentially communists. Believe it or not, the ancient Israelites, whenever they broke away, they went essentially communist. Okay? And what happened was there was a prophet in the land of Israel, the modern side of things. This was a modern prophet. Okay? He was an Israelite prophet. That made him modern, because Israel represented anything modern. Judah represented anything that had already been done. That was essentially the third coming. This is what I figure anyway. Okay, so that was kind of over. They had moved over into Israel at that point. Israel was the modern conception of things. So I'm talking about a modern conception of things here. I'm not talking about third coming. Okay, and then what you had was you had the leadership in Israel essentially became communist, as I said. And then what happened was Elijah rose up, a prophet, and of course they had to try to kill him, because he claimed that Jehovah had ruled to the throne, that there was an ideology that had ruled to the throne here that was not their communistic ideology of things, essentially. It was the idea of the office of a prophet had a legitimate claim. That ideology had legitimate claim, and that these people had done nothing but usurp authority over the people. That's essentially what it was. That's why Jezebel tried to kill him. That's why Jezebel tried to kill Elijah, because he was claiming that he was a prophet who claimed that there was a different way in the modern world of Israel to do things. Essentially, that's what to really simplify it. And that's what you got going on right here. This ideology that I'm saying is the modern equivalent of the Elijah ideology, because it is saying it is modern just like theirs. It's all Israel, because Elijah was from Israel. He was not from Judah. He was an Israelite. Okay, he was from Gilead. And Gilead was part of Israel. Okay, he was a Tishbite from Gilead in Israel. What it represented was he was a modern prophet. Israel represented the modern thinking, and Elijah was a prophet from the area that represented modern thinking. Okay, so, and that's why that they didn't like him. They don't like this concept that there could be a modern prophet, essentially. But that's the way it went in history. Elijah was the modern prophet. Okay, that was the history of it, and it's no different today. What it is you got all these communistic Israelites out here, and there is a modern ideology of what a prophet is out here, which I'm saying, and they don't like that. They got to try to kill that. Jezebel out here's got to try to kill that. What is Jezebel? Jezebel, see, the love divine is the self-proclaimed woman message, okay, and modernism. What was Jezebel? The modern woman that painted her face and the whole 9 yards, okay? So she was the one that tried to kill Elijah. What's trying to kill this ideology that I have? What's trying to shut it down is the modernist woman, the love divine ideology. That's what's the Jezebel. That's our Jezebel of today. That's what's trying to kill this. That's why, Elijah, I feel I certainly can relate to Elijah. Elijah, when Jezebel tried to kill him, I went back and read it. Jezebel was trying to kill him. So what is it now? They're trying to kill you. They're trying to kill your influence. Any prophets that's going to rise up in the modern age, just like back in ancient Israel, which was modernist at the time. Any prophets that rose up, prophets for the Lord, essentially, that rose up and bucked the system, the status quo as it was, they tried to kill him. Okay, so what do they do now? If anybody in modernist form, anybody that believes in post-third comingism, like the Love Divine do, the Israelites, that is going to rise up and try to buck the system, essentially, and claim claim to be divinely inspired to do so, is going to be their influence. That the Love Divine are going to make sure that they try to kill that guy's influence. Okay, they're going to do their best. That Jezebel, Love Divine, is going to do their best to kill that guy's influence. That's how it works. Okay, so anyway, what Elijah had to do was he had, whenever Jezebel said she was going to kill him, I'm going to do because Elijah had killed the prophets of Baal, and Jezebel's like, well, I'm going to make sure that you're dead by tomorrow. And so, in so many words, in so many Old English King James words, so Elijah where did he go? He went to Beersheba. Okay, do you know where Beersheba is geographically in Judah? Okay, I have had to go. I feel like I said, I feel like I can relate to Elijah. I have had to flee from the persecution of the modern communist Israel back to Judah, the third coming. I have had to go hang out in the third coming. I'm not third coming, but I've had to go hang out there because if I'm in Israel, they're going to try to cut my head off. Okay, if I try to hang out in the Love Divine, they're going to try to cut my head off. So I've had to go to the third coming and hang out with them, essentially. So anyway, I'll give you another example of this whole thing. If you all say, see, everybody seems to think that this stuff, they say they got a modern message. What it is it's a modern version of an old message. We don't have modern messages here, essentially. It is a modern message, but it's what we have is see, when Israel came along, they had a modernist message, essentially, okay, for their day. But it wasn't a new message, because it had happened many times before then. And it always happens. It's always been here. The Love Divine don't have a new message. They have a modernist message that is a modern version of an old message. That's what they really have. What I'm telling you is the same thing. I have a modern version of the old prophet message. Okay, the old prophet equivalent message. They have the modern version of the old Israelite communist, essentially, message. Okay, it's not new. There is nothing new under the sun, but it is modernist. Okay, it is a modern version of an old modern message. Okay, let's clear that up. Let's get that sorted out here. What's really going on here? Okay, so anyway, so whenever they say you need to be re-educated to the new message, well, I see what's really going on here. I see what it really is. It's really not a new message. If it really were a new message, I would agree with them. If they could say a message that was actually new, I would perhaps say, well, maybe a person does need re-educated to that. But people do not need re-educated to a modern version of an older modernist message. You see, you don't. If you understood history, you would know. See, the Taiwanese probably understand history, and they know that that's not how it works. And that's what I'm saying. That's not how it works. Because there is nothing new under the sun. There literally isn't. Okay? So anyway, you just got to understand it for what it really is. These things are not. They're not new. They're just modern reincarnations of the old thing that I had already. It's a modern reincarnation of an older version of a modernist message. And this stuff has been going on. It's been going on since the dawn of time, if you could say that, for lack of better words. I don't necessarily believe in a beginning or an end, but it's what's always existed. It's ever existing. This love divine ideology out here, and the ideology I'm talking about, these things have always been here. They didn't just come up. They've always been here. Okay. So anyway, we're just regurgitating them. I don't know, regurgitating would be the right word, but we're replaying them. That's all we do here. That's all we do. As Bugs Bunny used to say, we do this all through the picture, folks. So that's what I'm telling you. We do this all through the picture. You just got to figure out what's really going on. And so anyway, and of course I don't expect communist mainland China to believe me. I mean, I'm just trying to, at the least maybe if I can keep my island, So anyway, but they haven't been able to get the island. See, mainland China has not been able to get the island of Taiwan, you see. See, the love divine ideology out here has not been able to get this ideology, this little island ideology. They ain't been able to get it. They can't get it. They can't get their grubby paws on it, you see. They want it. They want me. They want the one China policy is what they want. They want me to be part of them. That's what they want. And it ain't happening. Just like it ain't happening in Taiwan, at least as of yet. So anyway, and it ain't happened here as of yet. That they can't get my ideology to match up with theirs and be part of the one China policy. That's what they want, and they can't seem to get it. Okay. So anyway, and what do? Well, see, whenever Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan, what happened was how did the communists respond? They responded by essentially blockading Taiwan with ships and putting sanctions or whatever on what could be done a little bit of trade war that was on the news with Taiwan, and then they declared the area around Taiwan a military exercise area and basically blockaded Taiwan with military. Okay, I find it funny that they're always like, the Love Divine are always like, well, we don't believe in fighting and this and that. Yet they're highly militaristic when it comes to what they believe. Okay, and I'm sure there's a lot of Third Coming people out here that would say amen. Okay, so anyway, but that's what they are. They are highly militaristic. That's what they do. Once I put this message out, what are they going to do? They're going to put a blockade around it. I guarantee you. That's what these communist Love Divine bunch are going to do. As soon as this comes out, because what is this? What is this message I'm preaching right now? Look at it from the outside in. What it is I am essentially a state representative lending legitimacy to the Taiwanese claim to rule of all China. By saying this, I'm doing essentially kind of the same thing that Nancy Pelosi did. Okay, and what is their response going to be? What is the Love Divine response going to be to what I'm saying here, this message? They're going to put a military blockade around it. That's what they're going to do. That's exactly what they're going to do. You watch and see. Okay, so anyway, that's what they always do. Anytime you say anything, like I said, anytime you say anything about, Taiwan having a legitimate claim to this thing, then, oh boy, that's something's got to be done about that. And, anytime somebody, whenever I lend legitimacy to that claim, to this office of a prophet in modern form, having legitimate claim to spiritual leadership of the spiritual ideology world out here, then they're going to have to put a blockade around that. They're going to have to put a spiritual blockade around that and practice military drills and threaten this ideology. That's what it's going to be. Okay, they probably won't physically attack it, but they're going to certainly threaten it ideologically. I guarantee you that. They're going to be shooting their guns ideologically, spiritually speaking. That's what's going to be going on. The ships is going to be the Chinese spiritual ships out here is going to be shooting off some rounds as to make a statement. That's what's watch them. You watch the You watch the Love Divine, they'll be shooting off some rounds about this. I guarantee you. They'll be just like they're shooting off of them ships. They're shooting some rockets off of them ships to show their strength. They're going to be shooting some rockets out of their mouth to show their strength about this. Watch and see. I'll do maybe one more example, and then I'll let you all go. One more example I want to do. If you all think that this stuff ain't come back again, then hear this one. If you all think that this communism, this spiritual communism, all this stuff hasn't come back again, this divine right to rule hasn't all come back again, then let me give you the primest of examples I can to prove that this has already happened before. And it shows exactly what's going on here. Okay? It shows exactly what's always going on. It's like this. Like I have said, let me give you one example before I tell you that. You can't have one thing come back without all the rest of it coming back exactly the same. Okay? You can't have, like, every year when they make cars, they make a truck, a car, and a van, basically. Okay? Well, when the new year comes out, you still got a truck, a car, and a van. They might look somewhat different, but you still got a truck, a car, and a van. And one comes back with the other. That's how it works. Okay? Well, all the stuff that's happened here has come back just exactly. They say it's a new thing, but I don't find anything new about modernist ideology breaking away from old-fashioned ideology, like the Love Divine breaking away essentially from the Third Coming ideology. That's nothing new. That's what we've done throughout all of time, is break away from old ideologies, essentially. That's what I did. I broke away from it too. Okay? So we broke away from that type of, situation exactly. Okay? But you don't get one thing back and not get another. So you don't get back the idea of Israel breaking away. See, they believe that the Love Divine agreed with me whenever I said they were modern Israel, because that essentially was, they were breaking away from old Judah, the old ideology on things, okay? So they said, sounds good. That's what we agree with, okay? But whenever I say that, by the way, there's a prophet, there's a prophet ideology out here too, represented by Elijah. Oh no, we can't have that. We can't have such that equivalent of a modern type of a thing, because we don't believe in prophets, you see. So, but you can't have one thing come back without the other. You can't have the car come back without the van. You see what I mean? The new model year comes out, and you got to have them both. So what I'm saying is if you believe that your ideology out here is Israel, then I'm telling you, there's got to be a Elijah-type prophet out here ideology to be at odds with with your ideology. That's how you can't have Israel without having Elijah. If one comes back, the other one comes back. What I'm saying is the ideology in modern terms. It's ideology. It's not, like I said, I don't want to make it personal, but it's ideologies. You can't have the Israel ideology, the Israel broke away modernist ideology, come back without having an equivalent Elijah modern Israelite ideology to go against the Israelite communist ideology. You can't have that. You got to have them both. So anyway, let me give you this example. So what I'm saying is this got to be here. Okay. One more. Jesus. I'm going to give you the most prime example. What's the most prime example of all time? Jesus, right? Okay, hypothetically. Okay, Jesus is, he's like the main dude. You got to give an example. Well, he's the main example. That's the idea of it. He's like the main example of all time. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of Jesus here. Here's what happened. Take the story from the beginning. 3 wise men see the star of the Messiah, and they come from the east, and they come to talk to King Herod, and they say, hey, we've seen the Messiah star. We know that this Messiah dude is coming. And they're like, and he's like, oh, okay, well, when you find him, go find him and bring me words, or whatever. So anyway, they go down there. The story might not be exact, but anyway. So they go down there, and they find him. He's born in a manger, and they bring him myrrh, gold, and frankincense. Okay, so anyway, the wise men apparently take off back to the east, and they're like, well, King Herod don't know nothing about it. So anyway, in the meantime, Jesus grows up a little bit. Mary had a dream, I think, and said, get out of here and go to Egypt. Okay, and then, so they're gone. Jesus takes off. And then Elijah, a couple years later, or not Elijah, but King Herod, a couple years later, he says to his rabbis, he's like, because they know the scriptures, he says, where is this Messiah supposed to be born? I guess the wise men ain't coming back to tell me where he was at, so I could go down there and stab him with the sword myself. So, or get somebody else to do it for me or whatever. So anyway, they're like, well, he's supposed to be born in the scriptures say Bethlehem or Nazareth or something. I can't remember. I think it was Bethlehem. So it's like, okay, you all go down there and you kill every kid there that's under a certain age, because you could tell probably by the time when the wise men got there, it said he would be born, that if he killed all the children under the age of like 10 or whatever, that he would naturally have also gotten Jesus and gotten the Messiah. Okay, why did he do that? Herod was essentially communist. What he was doing was this is the same thing over again. They knew that the Messiah would be the Son of God, and he would have the divine right to rule as King of Israel. Okay? He was Jesus after all. He was the Christ. Okay, that's the point. Okay? So Herod goes down there and kills them all to try to make sure that he's got that one and got him and killed him. Okay? Because what they don't want is they don't want this divine inspired leadership. They don't want this divine right to rule by the fatherhood to the sonship. They don't want that. They don't want any of that. Same thing today. They don't, no prophets. Okay? They don't want that. Same thing that the Message said. They said, no more prophets after William Branham. You know why no more prophets after William Branham? Because those imperialist Message pastors would have been up, pardon my French, crap creek. Okay? Because if when the prophet came along, and the prophet came along and proved that was a bunch of bunk. Okay? The prophet of the third coming came along and proved that what they were saying was the third coming was a threat to their legitimacy of claim of rule that they had ruled over the Branhamic people, essentially. And of course they were saying, no new prophets. There's no prophets after William Branham, because they didn't want it. They didn't want there to be any prophets after William Branham, because that would have been a prophet, a divine prophet would have been a challenge to their rule over the Branhamic world. Okay, that's what we saw. So it's the same thing today. The third coming has got back to the same condition that the Message were in, by their modern ideology of things, by saying that their ideology essentially is saying that there are no more prophets, because a modern prophet ideology, by comparison, would be a threat to their claim of legitimacy. And they have done nothing. That ideology has done nothing but usurp authority, usurp the leadership over the people, just like the Message people did back then. Yeah, I know that's a statement, but it's the truth. That's exactly what they've done. This love divine ideology has usurped authority over the real leadership, over the real divine leadership ideology over the people. They've usurped the authority over that, when it's supposed to be this divine leadership. This divinely inspired leadership is supposed to be the leadership over the spiritual world. Just like the Message people, they usurped authority over the whole thing. That's what the love divine's done. So anyway, just like King Herod's trying to kill that, trying his best to kill that divine ideology, that divine, the modern Herod out here is trying to kill the divine ideology of this Jesus divine prophet, you see. This divine Christ, essentially, ideology. But it's done an ideology now. There's a Christ ideology, divine ideology right now that the Herods of the love divine are trying to kill, trying to make sure it never sees the light of day. This message, they don't want it to see the light of day. They want to make sure it's dead, nip it in the bud before it has a chance to get out. That was their ideology. That was their idea. Okay, so anyway, Jesus gets out. What happens? Well, turns out they didn't kill him. Well, turns out, guess what? They didn't kill this ideology. They tried to kill this ideology, and here I am. Here is this ideology trying to raise its head up. Okay, they couldn't kill Taiwan. They couldn't kill Jesus. And they can't kill this. Okay, so anyway, except for the fact that they will eventually kill it, but they really didn't kill it. Even though they killed Jesus, they didn't really kill him. Even killing him didn't kill him. I mean, he resurrected. That's the thing. You can see that, like you go back all throughout. It's the same story. The message people tried to kill the third coming. They couldn't do it. And they're trying to kill this same type of modern version type of that ideology today, and they can't do it. They might kill it, but they still won't kill it. Okay, so anyway, what happens is Jesus rolls back in out of Egypt, and he grows up and starts to preach and everything. And then they realize, well, here he is, and who tried to usurp authority over his rule to the spiritual kingdom of Israel at that time? The Sanhedrin, the 70 rulers in Israel, the 70 rabbi rulers or whatever in Israel tried to usurp authority over the Messiah, the divine Messiah. Okay? Communism, the 70 rulers. See, what it is it's the big rulership of all these people. It was one man, one guy, the Messiah, against the 70, against the communistic bureau, the leadership bureau, and then the high priest, which was essentially the communist president. Okay, all of them against the Messiah, all of them against the divinely inspired Christ. Okay, and that's what you have here today. You've got a bunch of this love divine ideology that is all these people on this round table ideology, and this with the one head of leadership, with the high priest, that is against an ideology like this. That's what's going on. And they'll try to kill it. They try to snuff it out every chance they get. They try to say something bad about it to make the people that won't listen to it. That's what they do. That's exactly what happened with Jesus. That's what always happens. They think that, I heard them a while back, they said, don't crucify Christ again. And I'm like, you're the ones doing it. You're crucifying Christ right now by crucifying this ideology. That's what's going on. Okay? So anyway, I don't think I can make it any plainer than all that. There's enough there for anybody who will believe it to believe it. And so anyway, I think that pretty much sorts it out. I can't think of anything I want to add to it. I think that's basically it. I guess I will let you all go. It's been fun, and peace.